Greetings, masters, knights, and my fellow apprentices. Today I am going to be discussing my thoughts on the following quote from Meyer, a well-known 16th century swordsman and writer of weapons treatises, such as the Gründliche Beschreibung der Kunst des Fechtens, or Thorough Descriptions of the Art of Fencing. This manuscript has been said to be one of the most complete systems within the medieval German martial arts. Meyer was also self-described Freifechter or free fencer, the name apparently relating to a fencing guild founded in 1570 in Prague, though Meyer himself lived in Strasbourg. The quote itself goes roughly as follows: "A skilled fencer wants to have changes, and must know changing, for he who changes inexpertly, or in an unpracticed manner, and not at the right time, only delays himself or misses the opportunity and makes himself open without cause or need. But for he who is experienced in combat and knows how to use changing, it is an artful work, and should be used against those who only work with the sword and not the body. But changing is diverse. Change in opening from one side to the other, change before the attack from one stance to another." Before I give my own thoughts, I need to make clear that I have chosen to smooth out the original text a little to make it easier to deliver in speech, but that my thoughts on the subject are involved with the whole text as it was originally presented by Master Anonymous, and with all the various possible translations offered for Meyer's words. My first thoughts here are to the emphasis that Meyer places on being proficient and practiced in the methods you are going to use. It would seem to me that he is in essence telling us that whatever you choose to do in a combat situation, you must be sufficiently practiced and skillful at it in order for it to have a high degree of success. Certainly, you can occasionally surprise an unprepared opponent with a radical or off-the-cuff maneuver, but you risk much by using the battlefield or dueling arena as your laboratory for testing out new and unproven techniques. Better then to drill your methods to perfection and have in your arsenal a wide variety of tactics and ruses, which you can deploy with certainty and skill at the appropriate time. In fact, Meyer seems to be going as far as to say that having such well-practiced methods at your disposal is actually the mark of an expert swordsman, and is what sets such a person apart from the enthusiastic novice. Another point that emerges from the text is the use of timing. Meyer makes the point by implication that those who lack the necessary skill and finesse in changes will attempt to use such tactics at the wrong time, and will at best be unsuccessful and delay their own victory, while at worst they leave themselves open and vulnerable to counterattack. Of course, in a modern setting, this would amount to losing a point, or a match, or being eliminated from a battle simulation game. But in the time in which Meyer is writing, the consequences would be far more gruesome and final. In fact, such errors could cost the swordsman their life. A third point I see being made is the nature of the opponent against whom such tactics can be used. The phrase "and should be used against those who only work with the sword and not the body," though clipped from the original, seems to suggest that what we have here is an experienced swordsman and combatant facing someone of lesser skill. In effect, I believe Meyer is suggesting that you should take advantage of your adversary's lack of knowledge and experience and use your greater arsenal of techniques and tactical subtlety to bring victory. This actually reminds me of another discussion which was had recently, where a swordsman had posted his thoughts on how it was possible to see the very fullest level of technical exploration and style only in uneven matches, i.e. ones where the skill, experience and ability of one swordsman completely outclasses that of the other. I believe Meyer's point to be somewhat similar, but not exactly the same. It seems to me that what he is actually saying, warning us perhaps, is that changes are likely to be the most effective only against those who lack the skill to deal with them effectively. This would seem to imply that they will be less effective against a swordsman who is also skilled in their use and application. That would seem to make sense. The translation uses the word changes consistently, and it would seem that Meyer goes on to describe something of what he means by the word towards the end of the quotation. He talks about two things specifically. The first is changing opening from one side to the other. While this is a very short sentence, it does suggest an idea which I want to explore. It suggests to me a strategic, chess-like approach which seeks to do one of two things which immediately come to mind. The first is to give your opponent what you want them to have, perhaps what they have been waiting and looking for, and then expecting them to take it. I would suggest that the idea here is to deliberately leave yourself vulnerable in a particular zone or on a particular side, thus enticing your opponent to try to take advantage of what, if you are skillful in selling the deception, should appear to be an opening you cannot cover. In order for this to succeed, however, you must appear vulnerable, but also blissfully unaware of the fact that you are, or your adversary will not be convinced. The second, perhaps even more subtle possibility from the phrase change opening is different in nature. It is not so counterattack centric, but rather far more subtly aggressive. Again, a chess analogy comes to mind, that of openings. Here I am thinking of positioning your pieces for a specific attack, while attempting to hide the fact that you are doing so. Returning to swordplay, it seems that you could change your opening, meaning perhaps the side of the body on which your blade is stationed, or even the angle of guard and body zone coverage you are using, with the specific intent of setting up an attack of your own. I think from my observations of the last few years, watching Masters Anonymous and Fornach in recorded sparring sessions, it would be fair to say that certain guard positions and postures give advantage to particular methods of attack, and of course methods of defense as well. Equally, I believe it to be true that there is a balance to be struck, as certain postures and positionings make other techniques more difficult and time consuming to execute, and therefore less likely to succeed. Returning to Meyer's idea, I believe he is implying that by subtly changing how you position your body and weapon, and by being careful to not allow your opponent to read such a repositioning, you can create openings for yourself that would appear to come from nowhere and be difficult to defend against. The other phrase specifically used in Meyer's quote was changed before the attack, from one stance to another. This presents a different use for changes, I believe, and my understanding of what it is meant is as follows. Suppose that your opponent has set up to make an attack to a particular zone or mark of contact based on your stance orientation and weapon position. Then, a split second before they are ready to launch their attack, you suddenly switch to a different stance, angle relative to theirs, or move your blade to cover the very spot they were threatening. You break their rhythm and throw them into momentary chaos, as they have to stop themselves mid-tempo from launching what is now a futile gesture and re-evaluate. This now gives you the upper hand and the ability to score a mark of contact of your own, while your opponent is confused. I believe that this is what Meyer is suggesting here. The use of sudden changes of movement, stance, body, and weapon positioning a split second before you feel an attack coming, in order to spoil your opponent's strategy and create an easy opening for yourself. Another application of this phrase, which I believe possible, is to change our thinking about who may be making the attack, which is mentioned. In my first example, I have assumed that the opponent is the one about to attack, and we are acting as defender or counter-attacker, trying to spoil their advance. However, what if we were the aggressor all along? Suppose then that, like my earlier points about setting up attacks by subtly changing body posture and blade orientation, we are aiming to launch an attack to a specific zone. This time, though, we make no change or movement until the very last possible moment, giving our adversary no chance to read our intent. An example of this might be positioning our bodies low, almost crouched, and keeping our weapon down, as if we are looking to sneak a long-range attack to zones 5 and 6. But at the last second, we spring up and target shim to the top of the head, zone 1. This is, of course, a very basic and unrefined example, but I hope it makes the point clear enough. It is my belief that Meyer could be referring to a feint here. In conclusion, I should like to take note of the fact that Herr Meyer makes reference to the diverse nature of change, and from that we must infer that there are a huge variety of possible interpretations and applications, even to the few sentences offered in the quote. My thoughts have been aimed towards combat application, as well as the necessity for rigorous training and drilling of these skills in order to gain full mastery and maximum benefit from their use. However, I am certain that this barely begins to scratch the surface of what was in Joachim Meyer's mind when he wrote these words, and we could spend decades exploring them fully. It is my hope that I have done some justice to the task set, and I look forward to any feedback I may receive. Thank you for watching, and may the force be with you.